Hi everybody, welcome back. In this video we're going to cover public goods and common resources. So picking up from negative externalities, public goods and common resources are often associated with negative externalities, and because of their characteristics, we're going to have some of the similar traits or similar and also similar policy responses that we would see when there are externalities involved. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. The outline here is we're going to look at these two excludable and rival in consumption, these two classifications of goods. And then from those, we'll classify different types of goods and then go into a couple examples. So public goods ultimately are things that we can obtain or consume without paying for them. So I would encourage you to maybe pause and think about some different things that we consume but we don't pay for. And I'm going to go ahead and write down a number of examples here. So common example in some places, or it could be the case that water could be a public good, particularly clean air, clean water. We pay water bills and whatnot, but there are places where we can obtain water for free and drink it, and it's just fine. Related to water, fish in public waters, and also other livestock. Kind of parks in general, which is related. So we can go to a public park, and or we could go to a national forest. We could fish for fish in public waters, and we can do all of that without paying. So it's possible that we're not excluded from it's hard to exclude people from entering parks. It's hard to exclude people from fishing in public waters. So a lot of these natural resources and outdoor activities can often be thought of as public goods or common resources. Also, public education. And if you think about it, something like learning actually, let me write this down. Learning in a university classroom. So technically, the learning part of college is hard to be excluded from, especially in very giant universities with massive lecture halls and dozens or maybe even hundreds of students. Anybody could walk into that classroom and learn what the teacher is teaching. The excludable part and the private part of a university degree is the degree itself. It is that piece of paper that has your name on it and your field of study, right? So a diploma is a private good, but actually learning and obtaining knowledge is a public good. So there's a little bit of nuance there. I'll add one more, which would be national security. Okay, and so if the nation is being protected, I am being protected. That if the military is doing something to help protect the country, then that is protecting everybody in the country. If I don't pay my taxes, they can't tell me, oh, okay, well, we're not going to protect you if some other hostile country comes and invades, but we'll protect everybody who paid their taxes. That's not how it works. So national security and even local security as well. If I call 911, somebody's gonna come figure that out. They're not gonna help me. They're not gonna ask me first if I paid my city taxes. So these are some examples of goods that we consume without paying. And unlike private goods, there are no prices typically for these. or if everything was left to its own completely free market, then these things would have no prices. We do end up seeing some park entrance fees, for example, but that's because it's a public good, and we need means and procedures and policies to help combat the problems that we run into with public goods and common resources. So, since there are no prices, what can often happen is that the private market may fail to allocate the socially efficient quantity. And that's when we come back again to one of our first principles in economics, which is that the government can sometimes improve market outcomes. Okay, so that's a general overview. What we're going to look at here are to characterize goods into two kind of general categories: whether or not a good is excludable and whether or not a good is rival in consumption. So a good is excludable if a person can be prevented from using it. If a person can be prevented from using it. Couple examples there. Tacos, right? So if I go to a restaurant and I want a taco, I can be excluded from having it if I don't pay the price. Wi-Fi. I can be excluded from using a Wi-Fi network by a password being put into place. Okay, but what I cannot be excluded from are, for example, AM, FM radio signals. I can tune my radio to that radio wave, and it's going to pick up whatever's on the radio. I can't be excluded from listening. National defense, as well, as I just talked about. If I don't pay my taxes, I can't be excluded from that protection. Other example of what I was just mentioning, I can be excluded from having a diploma if I don't pay my tuition or if I don't complete all the requirements. But an example of what's not excludable is, say, learning economics in a class, especially a big classroom, right? Theoretically, if some stranger showed up to my economics class, I could tell them, hey, are you paying tuition? If not, you need to leave. But that's that's just generally highly unlikely to happen because people are usually here for the diploma rather than, but in addition to learning, hopefully, they're also there for the diploma. People who want to learn economics without a diploma are just going to watch videos. Excludability is one important concept. The next one is rival in consumption. And so a good is rival in consumption if one person's if a good is rival in consumption, if one person's use of it, the good, diminishes others' use. So if one person's use of the good diminishes the ability for others to use or consume it. Okay, another example, some more examples. Again, tacos, right? If I eat a taco, that's one taco that somebody else can't eat. It's gone. If I eat one bite of a taco, that bite of the taco is gone. And so in general, food is a really good example of a good that's rival in consumption. Non-rival, an MP3 file, right? If I have an MP3 file of some song, I can listen to it. And if I listen to it, it doesn't go away. I can listen to it again. I can share it with my friends. They can listen to it. That's non-rival. Another example could be like, actually, maybe both the diploma and the learning. I mean, this one could get a little tricky, right? But theoretically, adding one more person to my class doesn't take away the ability for the others to learn. Potentially, if you get into things about spending time in office hours, but if it's a small number of students, adding one more student isn't gonna change that much. So yeah, rival and consumption and excludability. So these are important, and with these, we're going to classify goods into different types of categories. And so private goods, these are things that we've been talking about in a lot of our other videos and a lot of the examples we use in supply and demand. But we'll use some examples. So again, going back to tacos, tacos are private goods, right? I can be excluded from having it if I don't pay. And my use of a taco takes away the ability for another person to have that taco. So tacos and food generally, something like maybe a car, right? If I have a car, I can be excluded from having a car if I don't pay for it. And if I'm using a car, then that's actually an even better example would be a bike, because there's only one seat, right? And so if I'm using the bike, it's very hard for other people to use the bike. And at the very least, it diminishes the ability for another person to use the bike. So a lot of consumer goods are just generally private goods. Okay, let's look at some examples of public goods. National defense. Not excludable, because if my country or my town is deciding to protect the people within it, they can't exclude me from that protection. And it's non-rival because if they're protecting me, that doesn't take away their ability to protect others, especially like at the federal level. Me protecting you, it's all the same. Same for parks. Public parks in particular, non-excludable. I mean, you will see some gates at parks and ticket booths, but a lot of times the parks can be kind of consumed without being excluded, and my consumption of a park doesn't take away from your ability to also see the park and enjoy the beauty and whatnot. So public goods. Common resources, both of these are non-excludable, but common resources are rival. And so a good example here are fish in international waters. Non-excludable, because if you've got a boat, you can go out there and fish, but they're rival. If I catch a fish, that's one fish that you don't have. Same for like timber, public timber, lumber, trees. If I cut down a tree, that's one tree that you don't have access to anymore. Okay, and then finally, and these two are the ones we're going to be spending most of our time talking about here. But there's one more, because there are 4 permutations here of excludable and rival. The last one is it can be excludable, but it's non-rival. Example here, Netflix. I can be excluded from having Netflix, but my use of Netflix doesn't take away the ability for others to use it. So that's called a club good. Even, in general, like a golf club, or any kind of country club, excludable. But if I have access to that business, that doesn't take away the ability for others to access that business. So Netflix is a really good example there. But again, focusing primarily on public goods and common resources, what we're going to do, actually, let's go ahead and do this exercise. We'll end the video after this exercise and then carry on from there. So first of all, I would encourage you, again, pause the video and there we go. Pause the video and see if you can figure out which is which here. And again, or not again, but this is going to depend on whether or not that road is congested and has a lot of traffic, and whether or not it's a toll road. And so this is kind of how I was getting into this this idea of public parks being a little bit iffy. Well, parks, roads, all of these things, they have the potential to be any of those 4 categories up above. It just sort of depends a little bit in each individual instance on the specific characteristics going on there. So let's think about this. So a road will be rival in consumption if it's congested. So if there are a lot of people on the road, then by me being on, like, think about this as rush hour, right? By me being on the road during rush hour, that's slowing everybody else down. But if I'm, driving out on some western highway and I'm the only person on the road, me being on the road is not taking away from anybody else's ability to use the road. So roads are only rival in consumption if they're congested or have a lot of traffic. They're only excludable if they're toll roads. So you're paying to be on that road. So we have our 4 possibilities there, and here's where they line up. An uncongested toll road, think of this as most roads in the country. This is going to be a public good. It's a normal road, it's not busy, and you're not paying for it. That's most roads. Uncongested toll road, that's a public good. Uncongested non-toll road. Uncongested toll road, we can think of this as a club good. And so this would be uncongested means that it's not rival in consumption. This is going to be most, so this one is most roads. This next one is going to be most toll roads. Because most toll roads, actually that's not necessarily true, but toll roads on like open highways essentially. If you start to get into congested toll roads, you might be closer to a big city, New York City or Washington, D.C. And so we'll get down to that one in a second. Let's do the third one really quickly. Not congested, non-toll road. That's going to be a common resource. That's kind of what we could think about as most roads, but again, sort of during rush hour. And so a single road might actually take on 2 different characteristics at 2 different points in the day. But if it's congested, then my being on the road is taking away other people's ability to use it. And so that could be like a normal highway going into a city in the morning, right? And then last of all, a congested toll road is a private good because it's rival and excludable. And so that one, again, we could think of as a toll road going into a major city that's going to be very congested. But ultimately, it just depends on whether it's rival, whether it's excludable, and the combination of those 2 things are going to classify goods as public club, common resource, or private. And yeah, and so this hopefully will get you a little bit of an idea about where things are heading. Again, we're focusing on the common goods and the public resources. And ultimately, public goods and common resources have externalities, and that's how this is attached to our last set of videos. Because there's something of value that has no price attached to it, and if you just let the market do its own thing, it's going to leave an inefficient outcome. So what we should be doing is either taxing or subsidizing based on negative or positive externalities associated with these types of goods. So in the next video, we're going to talk more about that, and then we'll do a couple examples looking at what we call the tragedy of the commons and a few other things. So that's all coming up in the next video. I'm going to leave it off here, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.